Hi, my name is Glen and I am the all-consuming post-production sound designer and recordist of The Witch's Hammer. Amongst the arena of low-budget filmmaking, The Hammer is very low budget, with practically all of the money going on the buying and processing of the 35mm film stock, so the crew basically work for free aside their day jobs until the finished film hits pay dirt. I like to liken myself to a sort of sound Batman, by day respectable office worker slash billionaire playboy, and by night avenger of evil and recording footsteps in ladies' shoes, doubling for Stephanie Beacham in my parents' driveway at midnight. Working in this way is very challenging, making work that could potentially be done in a full-time week normally spiral out into the distance. The one advantage of this, strangely, is time. The time spent at the day job lets me work things out in my head, letting an edit breathe a bit and opens things up for constant and forced reappraisal. Working for free means that you have to have some genuine passion for what you're working on, instead of being just a jobbing sound man. After becoming familiar with the script and footage, my first and biggest sound problem was working with the terrible quality location recordings. This wasn't necessarily down to bad recording or miking positions during shooting, but to the awful noise of the film camera they were using, which sounded like a combination of a jackhammer and a barrel full of clockwork monkeys.
Camera rolling, up, and action!
The terrible noise the camera made embedded itself in all the sync recordings. Added to this, I found out the camera and the audio were also losing sync as the camera wavered in speed, because it was so old.
Line.
Those who would disturb the house of my lord.
Pause. Line.
Have what they want.
During filming, they had tried to cover themselves with wild recordings of dialogue after the day's shooting had finished, but generally these were not of much worth, as they were mostly flat and not in scene, and occasionally not even saying the right words. All the actors were available in some way for dialogue replacement except for one, Beacham. For all of Stephanie Beacham's lines, the location wild recordings had to be used and proved very tricky to match up to her original sync lines. After shooting a sequence, they only did a couple of passes for each of Beacham's necessary lines, so there wasn't much to work with. Sound is generally disregarded by everyone on a location shoot, even the sound department sometimes, with the focus being purely on the visual side. Usually on very low budget efforts, unless a sound person is on board from the start that will follow through the shoot and potentially into post-production, the quality control can vary hugely as recording equipment is passed from person to person filling in. I'm not saying this happened on this occasion, far from it, but sound can be taken for granted until there is a problem to deal with, and I have seen this happen in the past. The quality of location audio was unavoidable in this instance. The lack of usable location audio turned my sound edit into something more akin to producing animation, as everything needed filling in, which is a little daunting when faced with an hour and a half of blank canvas. The sync location audio was used basically as a guide track. Dialogue-wise, the Whammer is about 99% ADR. Usually I try to work on a few sequences at a time and concentrate on them, but the re-recording of all the dialogue meant that in getting actors to come back in, I had to face up to everything all at once. Previously, when re-recording dialogue, I've tried to do it in a similar environment as it was originally filmed, hoping it to give some sort of energy and natural acoustic. But due to the dearth of material needed and having to match it precisely, we re-recorded at Amber Pictures HQ, with each actor forced to endlessly re-watch themselves and match their lip sync, while in the unexciting surroundings of a grey spare bedroom. We re-recorded on weekends during October and November 2005, with all the actors individually, exceptions being Jason Tompkins, who plays Oscar, who could not make the trip down to us, so a friend of the composer re-recorded him for us, and he did that in the north of England. Miguel Ruz, who plays Victor, had recently moved to Spain, but luckily most of what his character needed were fight vocals, so he could be saved by someone else. Whenever we did these day-long re-recording sessions, the last thing we always did was all the fight noises, so if their characters involved in a fight in the film, we got them to stand in the room and jump about and sort of pump their arms and growl and screech. I always felt a bit sorry for the actors as James and I barked orders at them, usually insightful stuff like, "Better!" and "like you said it 2 years ago." After each re-recording session, I generally spent a good couple of days afterwards going through it all, logging the good stuff and making copies of the edited takes. Even after the re-recording, logging and basic resyncing, the dialogue still required a lot of work. Even dialogue that at first glance seemed dead on, very precise cutting and resizing was required to match the original waveforms. In films and television there is a pretty well-worn formula to what noises vampires make, and admittedly I stuck quite close to this, but the variety of vampires in the Whammer allowed me to vary them quite a lot. Some characters in the film slip from human dialogue to vampire within the same scene, so for these I layered in animal noises, mostly dog growls, to give them that inner rage frothing up. For the full-on screeching vamps I stuck mainly to layering human vocals together, ranging from children to myself or whoever I could find, dirtying them up, pitching them up and down, reversing them and stretching them out. I had intended to add various jacked up pig squeals to this, but the human approach seemed enough. I did actually spend a day jumping in and out of pigsties at a local educational farm, roughing up piglets, but they didn't seem to want to give out for me.